Yo, what's going on? Good afternoon. Oh, my bad. Good evening. And shout out to everybody. And I hope you all had a productive day. So I'm live in effect. All right. On this late night tip. Late night is where I'm at. Okay. So I decided to come live. And today's topic is going to be about Black history, Floyd McKissick, and Soul City, North Carolina. So there's black people that's always arguing about, well, we don't have our own towns, we don't have our own city. And true enough, but how many people ever study about the history of towns and cities being built or being created by those in the African diaspora? How many people knew about Floyd McKissick in Soul City, North Carolina? So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is get to the information. All right. Now let's see where I want to start off at. Let's start off the history of Floyd McKissick and who he was. I'm trying to get. All right, so Asheville native Floyd B. McKissick was a lawyer, businessman, and civil rights leader. And this coming from website and Justice for All Durham County Courthouse Art Wall. Again, Asheville native Floyd B. McKissick was a lawyer, businessman, and civil rights leader. He was the first black student to be admitted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law and started his own law firm in 1955. Clients included the first black undergraduates to attend at UNC Chapel Hill in 1955. Durham's Royal Ice Durham's Royal Ice Cream Parlor sit in protest in 1957, and the families who integrated Durham City schools system in 1959. The lead plaintiffs in the 1959 school desegregation case were his daughter Jocelyn and his wife Evelyn. All right. So McKinsey participated in and advised the sit-in movement that spread across Durham in 1960s, with McKinsey leading the Durham Core NAACP became one of the most active youth movements in the South. During the 1960s, his sympathies moved towards a more radical black center view of civil rights. He saw no conflict in his activism in both the Congress of Racial Equality and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, a more cautious and moderate organization, nor in his friendship with Malcolm X, whom he invited to speak in Durham in 1963. In 1966, when McKinsey became national director of CORE, he soon shifted the organization mission from interracial integrationist civil rights agency to an organization that advocated for black economic and political power. In the last 2 decades of his life, McKinsey worked to build Soul City, a new town in impoverished Warren County. While it was to be open to all races, it would work to develop black owned and black controlled businesses. The town's inability to attract a critical mass of residents and a fierce opposition of Senator Jesse Helms led to a loss of all federal funding for the project in 1979. McKissick was appointed to a state district court judgeship in 1990. He died a year later of lung cancer. All right. So that's his biography. Now let's talk about the formation of Soul City. How did it come into existence? So now there's a book that people can check out. It's called Soul City: Race, Equality, and the Lost Dream of an American Utopia by Thomas Healy. And let's go into chapter 1. Right. So chapter 1 says Black Boy in a White Land. It said, where do we go from here? That was the question on everyone's mind. And Floyd McKissick was certain he knew the answer. It was May of 1968, 1 month after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. For 13 years, ever since the Montgomery bus boycott, King had been the moral conscience and public face of the civil rights movement. He had taken on Bull Connor and his Dogs in Birmingham campaign, inspired the nation with his soaring rhetoric in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and led the historic march for voting rights from Selma to Montgomery. His demand for freedom and integration had given the movement its sense of purpose, while his gospel of love and nonviolence had provided its strategic framework. The recipient of the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize, King had been the most influential Black man in America, perhaps the world. And although that influence had waned in recent years, as a younger generation of activists embraced more militant and separatist agenda, King was still the closest thing to a unifying Black leader. All right. And then let's go further down. Ralph Abernathy, who had assumed the reins of King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference, pledged to continue the Poor People's Campaign begun earlier that year. Leading a group of 3,000 demonstrators, he set up a tent city on the National Mall and demanded $30 billion in poverty relief and economic bill of rights that would give every American a guaranteed income. Whitney M. Young Jr., executive director of the National Urban League, called for a white people's march on the Capitol as a sign of interracial solidarity. While Roy Wilkins, head of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, pushed for new jobs legislation and adopt a cop program to improve relations between Black people and the police. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, more radical than its counterpart, deleted the word nonviolent from its name, urged Blacks to take up arms in self-defense, and contemplated a merger with the Revolutionary Black Panthers. All right. Then it goes on to say the Congress of Racial Equality rounded out the Big Five civil rights group, and it too was trying to determine the next step in the struggle for Black freedom. For McKinsey, who had been elected national director 2 years earlier, the answer was clear, and in the second week of May, he called a meeting of Course National Action Council to share his vision. They gathered in East Baltimore, which just weeks earlier had witnessed one of the worst riots in the country. For 8 days, the city's Black neighborhoods had resembled a war zone, with residents smashing windows, looting stores, burning buildings, and throwing rocks and bottles at police and firemen. Cops in riot gear had marched through the streets, firing tear gas, exchanging shots, and the snipers, and rounding up lawbreakers and onlookers by the hundreds. When local officers proved unable to quell the violence, Governor Scipio Agnew declared a state of emergency and called up 5,000 National Guardsmen. And when they too proved inadequate, President Lyndon Johnson dispatched 5,000 soldiers to the area. It took more than a week and the arrest of 6,000 people to restore order. And the final toll was devastating. 6 people dead, 700 wounded, and $12 million in property damage. Even now, as council members filed into meeting, evidence of the riots was all around them and boarding up windows, burnt out storefronts, and suspicious stares of newly armed shopkeepers. All right. Then goes on to say, inside, McKissick quickly got down to business. He began with a report he had drafted with the help of his assistant director, Roy Ennis, titled A Nation Within a Nation. The report argued that America was divided into two societies, one prosperous and white, the other impoverished and black. A dam separated these two societies, and like all dams, it held energy, could either create or destroy. The challenge was to channel that energy into constructive program for the liberation of Black society. The prevailing approach had been to rely on government welfare, the report declared, but handouts, quote unquote, were not the answer. Taxpayers disliked them because the recipients seemed ungrateful, while the recipient rescinded them because they offered no hope or permanent escape. Instead, the poor had to be given the same things everyone else wanted: jobs, opportunity, and control over their own destiny. All right. To achieve these goals, McKinney called for a sweeping program of economic development and urban reconstruction. At its heart would be a network of community corporation, non-profit entities owned and managed by local residents. Funded by government-backed loans, these corporations would finance the creation of local businesses and provide job training for the unemployed. They would also use tax incentives to entice white companies to build plants in minority neighborhoods, train residents to operate plants, and then sell them to communities after recovering their loss. After recovering their costs. The community corporation would use the revenue generated by the plants to invest in local businesses and pay for social services, thus creating a self-sustaining economic model. It was an ambitious and innovative plan that combined the elements of free enterprise and socialism. With an estimated price tag of 1 billion, it was far more politically palatable than the 30 billion sought as part of the Poor People campaign. All right. Then it says, but McKinsey was not interested solely in urban reconstruction. In his view, the problem of the cities were intractable from the problems of rural America. When the economics of rural areas collapsed, their residents poured into the cities in search of opportunity, which only exacerbate the overcrowded and destitution of the slums. Therefore, McKinsey believed it was vital to address rural poverty too, and his proposal for doing so was even more ambitious than his program for urban renewal. Instead of simply providing subsidies to farmers or locating a few factories in the countryside, he wanted to build new cities across rural America. His proposal here was less detailed than his plan for community corporation. He didn't say exactly how the land for such an undertaking might be acquired, though he indicated it might come from the federal government, which had plenty of surplus property. Nor did he explain how CORE might go about building new cities, though again he suggested help might come from Washington as well as from private foundation. If the details were lacking, however, McKenzie's passion for the ideal was not, and his plea to the council was personal and poignant. This is me, he told the 30 or so members gathered that day. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm willing to risk my life for, the same as I did when I led demonstration. And so if you guys want to look into this, you can find this book on Amazon. It's called Soul City, Race, Equality, and the Lost Dream of an American Utopia. Okay. Now let's get into the actual history. Rediscovering Black History. You can look this up on National Archive, Rediscovering Black History. Right, this came out on December 30th of 2014. It was written by Dr. Tina L. Ligon, archivist at the National Archives at College Park, Maryland. It goes on to say, as part of the Great Society, President Lyndon B. Johnson created the Model Cities Program in 1966. This program provided federal funding to community leaders in urban areas with the intent on developing affordable housing, establishing alternative forms of municipal government, and creating anti-poverty programs. Some of the areas that were selected to establish model cities were Detroit, Michigan, Oakland, California, Newark, and Camden, New Jersey, Smithville, Tennessee, and Chicago, Illinois. The Model Cities program ended in the mid 1970s due to conservative backlash from urban protests that occurred in the 1960s and widespread accusation of mismanagement of government funds. Civil rights activist Floyd B. McKissick was the driving force behind the Soul City project, which was to be built in Warren County, North Carolina. This model city was designed to be the resident for 50,000 people of all races and the home to businesses that will provide employment. McKinsey planned for Soul City to have schools, factories, medical facility, and a man-made lake and retail shopping by the 21st century. All right, so there's the sign. And this is Floyd McKinsey over here to the left. The series program records relating to Soul City 1974 to 1979 contains contrary newspaper clippings and photographs on Soul City project. And let's see. Let's try to zoom this in. All right. So it says Bear to Harris letter. And it says, Dear Miss Harris, it appears that our people and our media have become obsessed with finding fault, blaming, and accusing anyone who is vulnerable for anything that can be construed as a mistake. For years, I have seen and appreciate the was it? I have seen and appreciate the deal with which Mr. Floyd McKinsey has pursued his dream of an ideal community for Black people where families could reach their potential in an environment of dignity and opportunity. All right, so this was a letter to Miss Patricia Harris. Okay. He was known for this dream when he practiced law in Durham during the turbulent years after 1954. That is when he was first called to my attention by a white news reporter who confided to me that if she wanted to get to the core of a situation or to learn the truth, she talked with Floyd McKissick. All right. Later, I became acquainted with him personally through a business matter, which confirmed my impression of him. I am further impressed that despite a adverse publicity and lack of support by industrial leaders, he has persevered in his effort. So that this letter was written on June 14th of 1979, and the person that was writing this letter, let me find his name. The person that was writing this letter was Mayhem Bear. All right, he was writing to Miss Patricia, who was the secretary of HUD, the Housing Urban Development. Okay, so he was speaking on the behalf of Mr. McKinsey. So see, it says down here, it says the bulk of the series consists of letters dealing with the progress of the Soul City project. Although the letters focus on the later years of the project, they give some insight into the challenges and misconception of building a Soul City. The following letter is from Mrs. Richards S. Bear to Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Patricia Robert Harris, showing support for McKinsey and Soul City. It says in 1975, the Raleigh News and Observer wrote an article criticizing McKinsey's motives and accused him of corruption, nepotism, and mismanagement of government funds. Several members of Congress, including Senator Jesse Helms, political leaders in North Carolina, and citizens from across the country expressed concern over the progress of Soul City. Many felt that taxpayers' money should not be wasted on the project. The article prompted a federal investigation into the Soul City project. Even though the investigation found no wrongdoing, businesses refused to invest in the project and people chose not to relocate to Soul City. Below is a letter from North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms to Harris about concerns over HUD's involvement with Soul City. All right, so there's the letters at the bottom. And said, despite the continuing efforts of Floyd McKissick and his supporters, Soul City failed. The Department of Housing and Urban Development withdrew its funding in 1979 due to the lack of progress in creating Soul City. Despite the government foreclosure, McKissick continued to work towards his vision of a Black utopia. Today, there are a few hundred people living in Soul City in a couple of buildings. The following is from McKissick to Harris, detailing his accomplishment towards Soul City. All right. So let's see. Uh, I wish. All right. It says July the 6th of 1979. The Honorable Patricia Harris, Secretary, U.S. Department of Housing, Aid, Urban Development, Washington, D.C. Dear Secretary Harris, the general partners of the Soul City Company were shocked and surprised to learn of the June 27, 1979 action by the board of the new Community Development Corporation to seek to acquire the Soul City property. We had absolutely no forthcoming of this action and have no default on record to warrant this extreme remedy. All right. We were and are prepared to meet with you and your representatives to seek to find viable alternatives to the future of this new community. At no time, however, has anyone from HUD ever attempted to negotiate with us in an effort to seek mutually agreeable solution, nor has the task force ever sat down with us to discuss how or if Soul City could become financially successful. Except for a telephone conversation and informal and unplanned discussion with some of your staff, our only contact with the task force was for about 2 hours here in North Carolina and 4 hours presentation, which we made in Washington. So basically, that's him writing a letter to the Secretary of HUD, letting them know that, hey, we have put our best effort into creating this city, and we have not gained enough support or assistance from the HUD program, but we are being falsely accused of something that is not necessarily true. So, speaking on his behalf, he said, hey, I'm making an attempt to try to create a city that will benefit the minorities, particularly African Americans. So there will be more resources, there will be more jobs, there will be more opportunities available. There'll be more farming. But HUD said, nah, we don't know about that. We're not too sure because we believe there is something going on, that you mismanaging the money that we're giving you. And so it did not go successful because he lost federal funding. So he could not build up the city. However, the neighborhood is still around, but it's no longer thriving. It's just a neighborhood, right? And it's just like any other black neighborhood that you see, impoverished. But I'm quite sure there's investors that's looking forward to buying up the community. And speaking of black neighborhoods, right, in Black City, in Georgia, we have what's called, we have several areas, right, that went from being communities to becoming cities. And one of those areas happened to be South Fulton. South Fulton was a unincorporated city. It was just a neighborhood. It was just an area. And around 2016, it became a city of its own. However, there's a lot of challenges going on because it's very, it's still new. The town is still new. It's still in development. Okay. So it's a lot that's going on as far as like the law enforcement is concerned. Um, just trying to see like how far they're going to get with the city or whatnot. Then, of course, there's a lot going on with the politician, with the mayor. So lately in the news, the mayor allegedly took $20,000 and went overseas, went over to Africa with the money that was supposed to be going towards the city of South Fulton. And so city councils are pretty much being fed up with him. Yes, it's pretty much an all black town or whatnot. But if you have a leader that is corrupted and he's not doing what he's supposed to, as far as trying to keep the city going and trying to put focus into what needs to be taken care of as far as the resources, then what good is it going to do to say it's an all black town? So city councilmen are pretty much fed up with the madness. And yeah, so it's a lot going on. Now, we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know if eventually the city is going to end up becoming a neighborhood all over again and being taken over by the city of College Park or the city of Atlanta. We don't know. We don't know what's going to take place, but we do know this. It's a lot that goes into getting land. and trying to build a town. It takes a lot of work. So yes, we do talk about let's have our own community, let's have our own city, let's have this, that, and other. But you gotta be able to make sure that the people that you put in a position of power, you should be able to trust them enough to know that they're going to do right by those funds. And then you have to also make sure that the taxpayers are going to pay those taxes. Because if you don't have enough taxpayer paying taxes, then your town is not going to last. Then you also going to need funding from the state or funding from the federal government. Then you have to go about you're going to have to go about seeing how you're going to bring about housing for those who are in the low income community, meaning they well the low income bracket rather. For those who are in the low income bracket, how are you going to go about having housing for those individuals? It's a lot that goes into it. And law enforcement, fire departments, ambulance. It's a lot of things that go into having land. You can have a land, but if you're trying to create a town, that's going to take a lot. It has to take a lot of dedication and work. And then you have people who are very crooked. You have people who's not willing to help you. They're going to give you all kind of hard time, and they're going to look for every reason to find something bad or negative, or they're going to try to find a red flag to say, oh, you're misusing the funds, misusing the money. And then you also got to look at the redlining. You got to look at, well, who are the investors? Who are looking to buy up the community? Who's looking to buy up the land? Because if the investors is showing interest in buying up majority of the land to put businesses, you may not have that community for very long. So you got to understand the way this government operate, they look at money. Money is the key. If those dollars make sense, then that's who's going to get it. If somebody steps in and offer a lot more money to buy up properties or buy up land, then that's what is going to take place. That's who's going to get those properties. That's who's going to inherit those lands. The ones that got the money or who offering more money at that. So it gets really complicated. So it's not that people don't want to have land or don't want to have resources. It's just the complication behind it. You gotta understand this is a very competitive society. You up against competition. And by trying to create a black community at that and knowing our history in this country, it's very competitive. We gonna deal with a lot of hardship. Trust and believe that this government is gonna give us a hard time when it comes to wanting to own our own land. Hell, they give us a hard time when it comes to mortgages, when it comes to housing, owning your own property, paying property taxes. And then your property taxes might be high as hell because of the area that you live in, especially if the area is a high crime area, right? That's what people got to understand. This is what people have to realize. So it's so easy to tell people, let's go buy some land. Let's get some property. Okay, where are you going to go and buy land? How are you going to go about buying land? And how you know that land is not up for auction? How do you know the land that you trying to purchase is not up for auction? And if you investigate to see that, oh, they auctioned this land, then that means that you gonna have to go down to the area where the auction is taking place, and there's multiple peoples in the room trying to buy up that one particular property that you want. So it's a lot that goes into this. It is very competitive. It's very tiresome. And you got to have a lot of support system. If you don't have as much support system when it comes to having these type of resources, it's not going to work. It's not going to work, and it's not going to be beneficial. And that is just the reality of it. So Floyd McKissick had the right idea. He had the right mindset. He had a great vision. However, the plan was not executed properly because of the fact that he was accused of mismanaging the funds, and he lost federal support. So it's like, well, where else am I going to get the resources at? Where else am I going to get the money at? Because I can't turn to my community. They can only do so much. We don't have generational wealth. So where else am I going to get this money? How am I going to be able to fund the city that I want? And of course, he had to let the dream go. He had to let it go. So basically, it's like, well, I put up a fight for this. However, I had to let it go. I had to let go of the vision. So it gets really competitive. When I tell you it's very competitive in this society, it's very competitive. This is why it's important that we gotta study redlining and gentrification. And for those individuals out there, the Moors especially, talking about having a sovereignty status, a sovereignty nation, etc. That's very idealistic. But how are you gonna go about executing it? You can't go to the court system saying that I am a sovereign person. I have a sovereign state. I have my own ID. You can't do that and think that it's gonna work for you. No. You can try to live off the grid all you want to, but at the same time, you're gonna have to follow federal jurisdiction, the state jurisdiction, and the county jurisdiction, unless you're gonna have your own county. But you have to follow those three guidelines of the federal, the state, and the county. You have to follow those rules and their laws if you're trying to build up your own city. So you can't go around here and say, well, we're a sovereign nation.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of people making commentary. Um, Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people, making the commentary about we should not be um, rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. Um, but I feel like we should do both, and I feel like I support both, and I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three type of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters, and the looters almost exclusively.
Mhm. All right, you guys. I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna get the other video. I'm gonna start this video again. All right, so my microphone had went out, so I got the other piece. But I don't know if you guys caught on to what I was saying. I'm gonna have to start all over from the beginning. So I'm gonna have to go back to the copyright disclaimer. Let me go ahead and go back. All right, let me start again. So hopefully you guys can hear me. The copyright disclaimer under Section 107, the copyright 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in balance in favor of fair use. Okay. So I had to start from the beginning. So basically, the whole purpose is to let it be known that, hey, you are not the owner of the original material. You're only using it to bring about educational awareness, and the video or the audio or whatever it may be can be removed at any given time or can be requested to be moved. So that's the whole purpose. All right. Now, let's go back to the video. The video that I'm getting ready to play is by the sister named Kimberly Jones. It's called How Can We Win? All right. She goes into the social contract and she speaks on about this was during the time where there was police brutality and the situation that was happening with George Floyd and whatnot. All right. Um, she goes in and talk about how society have how the government pretty much broke the contract. And she talks.
I've been seeing a lot of things talking about people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to fuck shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why. And that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is that they're going to get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need. And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you. And for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money. I didn't allow you to have anything on the board. I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. Playing against, you have to play and their property, and they burn them to the ground. So if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money. I didn't allow you to have anything on the board. I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally, at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play, and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now, at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you, and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood. How can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own, by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your Target. Fuck your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
That was deep. That was deep. So that is well explained. looking at social contract, right? Now we need a social contract. But you done play this government game. And you still outnumbered. You still outnumbered, not just based on population wise, but based on the wealth. You can have a successful and thriving business. But when you have somebody from another race that come along and they have a little bit more to offer, the money is going to talk. The money is going to talk. The green is going to tell it all. So if you don't have enough money, somebody else going to scoop it up. And if you done lost funding, your community is going to be in shambles. So like she said, the government will break the contract, the social contract. So you can play the game for a long time, do everything that's right as a citizen. But if they find something wrong or they look for something wrong because they see you prospering, then the contract is going to be broken. But anyways, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. I thank you all for tuning in and watching. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening or whatever your time zone may be. And until next time, peace and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. And for those of you that's just coming in, you have to watch the video from the very beginning. So peace, be safe. All right, thank you.